What's up, y'all? This is Nick with From the Ground Up DIY, and today I'm gonna finish showing you all how to build the brick smoker. So if you didn't see the last video, I'm gonna leave a link down in the description and make sure you watch that video before you watch this one. But in the last video, I showed y'all how to lay the brick for the smoker. But in this video, I'm gonna show you how to get the smoker ready for the doors, how to make the doors, how I pour concrete slabs for the roof, for the fire pit side and the food storage side. And I'm also gonna go over the air circulation of the smoker. And then I'm gonna show y'all some modifications I plan on making in the future. To make the concrete slabs for the roof, I use the same concept as when I poured the concrete slab for my smoker foundation. I first started by measuring the length and width of my fire pit side. And when I did this, I added about 1 or 2 inches to my measurements because when I placed the concrete slab on top of the fire pit side, I want to make sure that the slab is hanging off the edges a little bit. And to make the form for the slab, I used some 2x4s I had laying around. And I made sure I cut them to my desired measurements. And once I got done with this, I used my drill and drilled the 2x4s together into a box shape. And once I got done with that, I cut out a piece of plywood and screwed that into the bottom, as you can see here. Before pouring any concrete into the form, I made sure that I rubbed the inside down with some mortar oil. And the purpose of this is that when the slab dries and you try to take out the wood form, it'll be easier for you to take it out. I filled the form halfway up with concrete, and then I decided to place 2 pieces of rebar into the slab. And the purpose of the rebar is to make the concrete stronger. After placing the rebar, I filled the rest of the form up with concrete, and then I used my trowel to spray the concrete over the rebar. For the concrete slab that's going to go on top of the food storage side, I decided that I wanted to have a hook hanging from the concrete slab, and this is just in case I ever want to hang any meat. To do this, I bought an over-the-door hanger, and you can get this from your local department store. And to start off, I started by tying up some rebar. I ended up tying 7 pieces of rebar together using Rebar Ties, and I placed 3 pieces of rebar in the horizontal direction and 4 pieces of rebar in the vertical direction. And I made sure that I placed my hook in the middle, and I had rebar on each side of the hook to make sure that the hook stays straight up. Now that my rebar is tied up, I filled my form halfway up with concrete, and then I placed the rebar that I tied together into the concrete. And when you do this, you want to make sure that you push down on it a little bit so that the rebar will be in the center of the slab. And once I got done with this, I filled the rest of the form up with concrete and then used my trowel to smooth the concrete over. One thing that you want to keep in mind is that you don't use the same form that you use for the fire pit side for the food storage side, because for my smoker, my food storage side is bigger than my fire pit side. So if I use the form that I made for the fire pit side, it's going to be too small. So make sure that you make 2 different forms for each side. I let the concrete slabs dry for about 2 days, and then after that I took them out the form. And to attach the concrete slab to the brick, first you want to place a mortar on the last layer of brick that you laid. And then once you do that, you want to get somebody to come help you pick up the concrete slab, and then you want to place it on top of the brick once you have the mortar applied. Once I got my concrete slab in place where I wanted it to be, I used my brick joiner to smooth out the joint line between the concrete slab and the brick. And I did this on the inside of the smoker and on the outside as well. And the purpose of this is to make sure that no smoke escapes through the rooftop. And I repeated these same steps for when I placed the concrete slab on the food storage side. And this is what the concrete slab looks like in place on the fire pit side. And I waited to put the concrete slab on the food storage side until I got my doors in. To get the smoker ready for the doors, I had to lay a few more brick. And I started by laying 2 brick at the bottom of the fire pit side, and then I laid 4 brick on top against the concrete slab. To make these bricks stay in place, I first had to stack a few brick up, and I also had to use a few pieces of scrap wood I had laying around to make sure that the brick stayed up against the slab. And once I had my brick in place, I still had a gap in between the brick, but to fill in this gap, I filled it in with mortar. I repeated the same steps on the food storage side by laying 8 brick at the bottom and 4 brick at the top. Before I started making the doors for the smoker, I first had to do some measurements, and I measured the openness of the fire pit side and the food store side, and I ended up having 8 measurements in all. And the measurements I had were 3 lengths going from left to the middle to the right, and then I had 3 widths going from the top to the middle to the bottom, and then I measured the diagonals going from corner to corner each way. So by doing that, you'll have 8 measurements for each side, 8 for the fire pit side and 8 for the food store side. And it's important to get these measurements because when you're making your doors, you want to make sure that it slides in good, so the measurements have to be on point, so make sure that you take good measurements. I went to my local metal distributor to pick up some sheets of metal and some angle iron to make the doors for the smoker. And when picking out your sheets of metal, you want to make sure that the sheets are big enough for your openings, and you also want to make sure that the metal is sturdy and it's not wobbly. I got my big cuz to help me out with the welding because I don't know how to weld, and he also got a YouTube channel called Friday Garage where he work on cars. So if you're into cars, make sure you go check his page out. I'll make sure I leave a link to his channel in the description. To start off, we used the measurements that I found for the openness to cut the angle iron at 45-degree angles. Once we got done cutting all the pieces out, we then used an angle grinder to knock off any rust off the edges of the angle iron. And we also did this to make sure that we have a clean connection for when we start welding. We welded all 4 corners of the angle iron, which is going to be used for the frame, by using a MIG Welder, which is a metal inert gas welder which uses electricity to join the metal. Then we used the angle grinder to smooth out the welds. Now that the frame is complete for the fire pit side, I use a drill with a wire brush attachment to try and knock off some of the rust that was still on the frame. We then used the angle grinder to cut the sheet of metal to the size that we needed, and the sheet metal is going to be used for the door. We then grinded out some clean spots on the sheet metal, the frame, and on these heavy duty hinges that I got so that we could weld all 3 together. After welding everything together, we went back and made welds on the outside of the hinges and on the inside of the hinges as well. And we did this just to make sure that the doors are sturdy and well put together. We then repeated the same steps to make the door for the food store side of the smoker. These are the doors after the welding was completed. After the welding of the doors was completed, I went and used some spray paint on the doors, and the spray paint I used was Krylon High Heat Max, and I decided to use this spray paint because it helps prevent rusting and it also protects the doors from the heat, so I went over both of the doors with this spray paint. To install the doors, I first made a batch of mortar and placed a thin layer on the inside openings, and once I had that all in place, I then got my door and slid it into the opening, and then I used my hammer to hammer in the edges of the frame just to make sure that the door had a snug fit inside the smoker. I then used the mortar that I had left and placed it around the edges of each door, and I did this to make sure that any smoke can't escape through the edges. One thing I noticed about the doors is that when I would close them, they weren't all the way flush with the frame. So to fix this, I ended up having to get some latches, and I also needed some handles and some thermometers for the doors as well. So I had to hit up my big cuz one more time and have him come through so he can help me weld everything together. We started off by welding the handles onto the doors first, and to do this, we used the angle grinder to grind out our clean spots, and then we welded the handles on. For the latches to work correctly, they have to be attached to the door frame, and to do this, I used the angle grinder to cut out a few small pieces of metal from a longer piece of metal stripping that I had. We then used those pieces and welded them to the frame, one at the top and one at the bottom, and we did this for each door. After that, we welded the latches onto those pieces of metal that we just welded onto the frame, and the latches, they come with this little hook, and we made sure we welded those on the door and made sure they lined up with the actual latches, as you can see here. To install the thermometers in the door, I used my hammer drill and drilled a hole in each door, and then I just slid in the thermometer and then screwed in the bolt that came with the thermometer on the back of the door. And this is what the finished doors look like. Now that I'm all done working on the smoker, I'm gonna tell y'all some of the modifications I had to make early on when I first started using the smoker, and then I'm gonna tell y'all the future modifications I plan on making to make the smoker work better. So even though I put the latches on the door to help prevent smoke from coming out the doors, I still had smoke come out when I started smoking my meat, unfortunately. And to fix this, I had got some lava lock silicone sealant and also some lava lock gasket. And the purpose of these is to make an airtight seal between the door and the door frame so that no smoke could come out. And even though I use these, I still have like a little bit of smoke that comes out, but it's way better than what it was. Another problem I'm having is keeping the temperatures up on the smoker, and usually when I smoke my meat, I like to keep the temperature between 225 degrees and 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And my smoker is able to get up to these temperatures, but it's hard for it to stay at these temperatures. And I think the reason is because of where I place my air circulation vents at on the fire pit side, and also where I place the pipe between the fire pit side and the food storage side, because honestly, I think both the air circulation vents and the pipe, I think it's too low on the fire pit side. And this summer, once it gets warmer, I actually plan on raising the pipe up, and I plan on doing this by using a wet core drill bit. I'm gonna drill holes on the inside of the smoker, on the inside of the fire pit side and the food store side, so I can get that pipe out of there and raise it up. And then I also plan on filling those air circulation vents up on the fire pit side at the bottom, and then just drilling new holes near the top. And the reason I'm doing this, because as we all know, heat rises. So I feel like if the pipe is higher and if the air circulation vents are higher, I feel like the smoker will be able to get more heat and be able to maintain the temperatures that I need it to be at. But if any of you know any way I could keep my temperatures up, or any way to help the airflow inside the smoker in general, please let me know in the comments below, because I worked hard on this smoker and I put in the work, so I want the smoker to work top notch. So please make sure you comment so we can talk about it and find a solution. But that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and make sure you like the video, comment, and subscribe to my channel. And also make sure you hit that notification bell so you'll be notified when I post my next video. But until then, peace, many blessings, and I'll catch y'all next time.